Okay, we're getting started a little late today with our recording. Welcome to week 3. Week 3. You know what that means in this class? That means the halfway point. We have 3 more weeks to go. That means that hopefully you got your assignments in on time. We'll be grading week 2's assignments that were just concluded on Sunday this week. And so by the end of this week, you will have those completed. In the meantime, a few of you have reached out to me concerning issues with a few things. Continue to reach out to me. I will always address the issues in quick fashion and keep you up to speed. I teach 5 classes, and you guys are my only 5.5-week course that I have of the 5 so far. Well, for this quarter, I had one T1, but this one T2. And so what I do is I prioritize my grading because you guys have the shortest and the most work. Of course, week 1 was not so tough because all you had was the quiz and your discussion posts. So anyway, I do want to tell you guys that last week I kind of commented about a seminar that was going to take place at the Romeoville campus where I had a chance to attend, and the topic of the session was, I think it was last Wednesday too. Let's see, I can look at my little calendar here. Yep, here it is. It was the 16th. It was heroin training, dealing with heroin issues, and had an opportunity to have really 2 former heroin addicts, people who had overcome heroin. One became a caseworker, and that's what he does now, is he works with people who has the problem. But and then there was a young man who was a former heroin addict, and he talked about all the different things that happened in his life that were adverse, that led him to heroin, which kind of supports the point that I share many times with students in this course. And the topic, and I've shared this with some of you guys through the discussion posts, is that many people who find themselves in addicted stages came about not, or rather should I say this, became criminals because of their addicted lifestyle. However, though, I've always expounded that people need to be not incarcerated so much in length, but need to be rehabilitated. In other words, I oftentimes compare individuals who are addicted to drugs to an individual who maybe has AIDS or maybe has the flu. At any rate, it's an illness that we will prescribe medication and treatment to get those individuals healthy again, and they can continue with their lives. Unfortunately, that is happening on a low level with individuals who are addicted to drugs, because the resources that are available are very, 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 very small, and that there are a lot of budgetary issues in that. And one of the issues that was brought out, for example, by the young man who indicated that while he was going through his changes, is that they met people, and this was really a good session because it was sponsored by our nurses. It was National Nurses Week, so the nurses, the nursing students at the Romeoville campus brought this group, these couple people together. But one of the things that was really prevalent in the discussion was that many individuals found themselves in ERs where they needed help and they were turned away, not because of the fact that they didn't have what could help them, but because those individuals didn't have insurance, and they did not have the adequate amount of insurance. Therefore, they didn't treat them there, and they would send them other places, and those other places where they could utilize the services without having the adequate insurance are far and in between. So consequently, and this happens a lot, not a little, and so what ends up happening is that those individuals are not treated, or if they are, they're given a Band-Aid situation to deal with a situation that needs to be eliminated. It's like instead of giving a person surgery, you slap a Band-Aid on them and then send them off. Well, that Band-Aid comes off, then they're back into the same problem. Well, you should be aware of, and many of you are, that those individuals will continue in their what we call addicted or junkie stage, and those individuals will find themselves committing whatever kind of crime. The young man was even talking about how he would steal money from his mother's piggy bank, from his little brother's piggy bank, take it from her purse. And the question was asked, how did he feel? He said he felt bad. But the fact of the matter is that he had this monkey, as we usually, you heard that term, on his back that put him in a position where it was controlling him and every movement that he made in terms of anything he did. So he felt bad about hurting people, but he also was ordered by his body to do whatever it takes to get what was necessary to get a fix, as they would call it. And oftentimes, too, the individuals that he said he knew, the young man said he knew, and this is what really got him, was one of his close friends that he introduced to heroin, eventually overdosed. And he felt so bad that it gave him a wake-up call. And he finally, after many times of trying to get off of the drug, he did get off, and he stays clean. And he indicated to us that it's only been a few years. Like, I think this is 2018. I think he said it's like 2016 or maybe even early 2017 that these changes took place. And so he's still, as they say, not out of harm's way. He has to be careful, he says, in situations where if he feels bad, not to slide back into that situation, because if he did, what he's going to, and he said he went to prison. He said he went to prison for crime and jail, and then he said this too, that while he was in prison, that the resources to treat him for his heroin addiction were not very good. Therefore, they would put them in holding, so to speak, give them a little treatment, and then release them back into society. So guess what they did? Yep, they became recidivists. And he said that that's the cycle that continues to happen. Well, it was so informative. And I thought I'd open up tonight's session by just sharing that with you of a real life experience. I just wish there was a way that we could have recorded that, but that was part of the deal, is that we didn't. We don't even know the last name of either of the individuals, just their first names, and that's the way it works. But one of the things that they did say, and they invited the students to do so, and I share this with you guys, is if you have an opportunity to go to some of these sessions, talk to organizations that have them, and there's ways that you can go and you actually learn from these individuals. Keep your eyes out for these kind of events in your own communities where you guys live, since you guys are spread out throughout the whole United States. But it's a real epidemic, and they're talking about heroin. Man, last week we closed out with talking about crack cocaine, and you know that the devastation that was taking place there with that. Well, now we're dealing with opioids and heroin and all some of these other things that we discussed in last week's session. So anyway, very informative, and I thought I would kind of take a little time to share with you. So let's get into the material that we can go over for the week here. Again, there's resources on the home page that are very helpful to you. A student asked me a question, and they said, I don't know where to see the lectures. And I told them, I said that in the class on the home page, right where I'm pointing right now, it says live classroom session information. And it tells you the schedule, which as we are in week 3, taking place at 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, with the exception of week 6, which will be coming up during week 5. And then also it gives you the links, the open house link. You can even go back and look at that. I did email it to you, but in case you can't find the email, it's right there in front of you. All you have to do is click on it or copy and paste it. Same thing for week 2. And then at the end of the day, you'll see week 3 lecture. So you can always find that there. But in order for you to know that, you got to first go look at the lecture if you didn't attend the lecture live. So very important. And also, one other thing, a student said to me that they couldn't find the key word in the lecture, and they sent me a message, and I says, well, it's in there. And I said, you have to look at the whole thing. What I have discovered, and I saw this, and I discouraged this, I mean, I really discourage you from doing this, is going through the lecture trying to find the key word. Don't do that. If you're not here today, of course, you don't do that. But if you are going to come back and listen to the lecture only because you need these points for a grade, that's not a good reason. I don't do these lectures for points. I do these lectures for information to enhance your knowledge about drugs and crimes and the effects that it has on our community, like what I just got through talking about a few minutes ago. So take the time out. The lectures, the first one was very long, but that was an overview. And then I gave you my little story about my life. Week 2, we ended right around 9:30 p.m. This one we might go a couple minutes over, but we won't go more than 10 minutes over at the most if we do go over. So anyway, very important because you learn a whole lot of stuff. All right, so now let's go down and let's look at our week 3 announcement. Policy and social trends, mental health and criminal behavior. Oh boy, that's a good segue for something that has taken place just recently. We will talk about this in just a few minutes. But anyway, I sent you previously chapters 3 and 4 of your textbook in the PowerPoint, which I won't go over today because I sent those to you and explained to you how you can utilize them. And then there are activities, policy and social trends, drug use, abuse, addiction, and theories of addiction and drug identification activities. I kind of talked about that a little bit already, but we're going to hit that up in a minute as well. And then reminding you of a discussion assignment, social policies and trends, which your initial post is due tonight, the 22nd of May by 11:59 p.m. CST, Central Standard Time. So whatever time zone that you're in, it's due by 8:30 my time. Of course, you don't have a problem if you're on the East, if you're down in Florida, because of the fact that you're an hour ahead anyway. So if you got it in at 8:30 your time, it would actually be no problem. If you're to the west of us, that's when the problem would occur. So anyway, social policies and trends. Your course project, heroin and crime. That is due. I kind of glanced at a few of them. They look pretty good. I will be grading them coming up soon. So you want to make sure that you get that completed. And then, of course, the quiz. Correctly, as I've noticed, some students have waited until the very end of the week to do the quiz. And that's awesome. That means that somebody's hearing me. And consequently, those individuals are able to score higher because they've gone over the materials, their readings, the PowerPoints, and listen to the lectures, and then they actually have done the assignments with the exception of the quiz and score higher because you'll have more information. And then my motto, adversity is a springboard to success. You know what that is all about. Okay, so let's jump over into a quick little bit of what I call redundancy, but necessary. The course calendar. There are two ways you can get the course calendar. Up at the top here, you will see the course calendar. If you look right here, you see it at the top there with his calendar, and you click on it, and it should bring you to the same place. So let me move this up a little bit. I don't want to create an event, so let's do that. I just want to move this. There we go. All right, so where are we? We are this week. This is week 1. This is week 2. This is week 3. Your reading assignment that I just gave you. Your initial post, the lecture taking place now, your reply post, and then your course project that will be due this Sunday. It's the second part of your course project. The first one is the one you just completed on Sunday, last Sunday, which was the 20th, this past week. So I will be grading that this week, and then the same thing with your course project. You'll be completing that, and I'll be grading that. Next Monday is a holiday. However, because we're online, it doesn't change anything. Our schedule will still be the same. We don't have a lecture on Monday anyway, so our next lecture will be next Tuesday. But you'll notice almost every week you just have the course project and the quiz. So very, 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 very important. We're going to talk about the assignment for the course project for this week. So let's just get right into the assignments again. Oh, and I want to remind you, this drugs and crime course guide is just awesome. If you click on this and open it up, I already shared that during week 1. You want to make sure that you take a look at that, and then you will find the situation that occurs. That very, very, very important. You guys are very fortunate that our team has put that together and is a very beneficial tool to assist you in terms of completing your assignments. Okay. Now let's again. Yeah, Professor Wright, why do you keep going over some of these things more than once? I'm glad you asked. Because some people don't get it the first time. Some don't get it the second time. Some don't get it the third time. But I still keep hammering at it and trying to make sure that I keep picking up people that get it. So let's take a look at the course project, Heroin and Crime. Well, and that's interesting that we we just got through talking about that. Part of the course project focused on the connection between drug use, addiction, and crime. And there are various theories concerning why people use drugs and the connection between drug abuse, use, and criminal activity. Here go my last statements that I made earlier when I opened up the class, giving you some firsthand knowledge, or as we say in the business, straight from the horse's mouth, an individual who's used heroin and what it did to them in terms of their lives. So anyway, it says the drug abuse crime connection is significant for heroin. I already told you that. For example, a person with a $20 per day habit will spend more than $7,000 a year on heroin. Did you hear that? $7,000 a year. I mean, that's quite a bit of money. 7,000 divided by 12, that's $583 a month, roughly. My car payment is not that much, you know, and so that's just on something to keep them going. Unable to work, so what they do, and they need to take heroin every day to avoid withdrawal sickness. That was one of the things that was discussed by the two individuals at the seminar that I attended, and they talked about how it is something that no one wants to go through withdrawals, except if you go through withdrawals, you can find yourself overcoming the drug, but most people don't want to do that. So what they instead do is they continue to take the short route, and that is to do whatever they need to do to get that fix, so they don't face withdrawals, which makes them very uncomfortable. So it continues, it says, with respect to the supply of heroin, there is constant violence, and that goes with what I said, dealers and wholesalers. And be aware of the fact that there are some dealers, quite a few as a matter of fact, who are not just dealers, but they're users as well. And they find themselves stuck with that as a career in order to survive, and that's really their job. And so they'll do whatever it takes. So there is this talks about one of the pipelines is Mexican drug cartels. Right now, as you already know, that there's a major drug cartel leader, El Chapo, who is being tried right now in New York for crimes that he's committed across the country and in Mexico, and dealing with drug cartels. And anyway, it says that their influence goes beyond the borders and into major cities around the country, and the criminal activity which occurs at the user level and the manufacturer dealer trafficking level is very severe. So you're going to research these issues and conduct research regarding various theories explaining the connection between substance abuse and criminal behavior. And I've given you some clues there, and be aware. And trust me, there are tons of sources out there that are credible, and our resource center has a whole lot of that information. So you're going to write a minimum of 3 pages and discuss these points that are mentioned below, and I won't go over them. At least 3 credible resources other than your text, okay? Other than your text. So if you want to use your text, which most of you guys haven't, which is good, Your text provides you with information to lead you to other sources. Don't rely also on things like Wikipedia. Not many of you have. One student did, and I dinged them some points. I gave him 0 points because it is prevalent throughout the PowerPoints and so forth. And so citations and references and a cover page must be included. And then it tells you where you can get the help. I already told you the course guide, and you know when your assignment is due. And then once again, clicking on the assignment tells you when it is due, this Sunday. It tells you possible 40 points, and it gives you the rubric. And if you click on it, it actually tells you the same kind of stuff that I stressed. Notice that the biggest part of your points comes from the quality and content information. By determining, did you satisfy all of these requirements in here, and things of that nature. If you didn't, you're going to lose points. If you left something out, you're going to lose it. And then, of course, if you don't do the 3-page requirement, you're going to lose at least 5 points right off the bat. I've had a few people to give me assignments that were 1 paragraph. Not going to cut it. Not going to cut it. And please do not submit your assignments single space. Do them double space, because it's easier for me to read them and make remarks and edit them if I have to. Then your writing mechanics, you follow and make sure that you do it. You see your 3 credible resources that are involved, you know, so credible, reliable resources, and make sure you don't use Wikipedia again. So we have it here before you. So that's the way every assignment operates in the course. So we give you a roadmap, and we give you a lot of assistance, and I'm always available for clarification. Okay. All right. So then the next thing is what we just said a few minutes ago, your discussion posts. And in your discussion post, you posted a very interesting first post, the strategies on the war on drugs versus the approach now, lock them up and throw away the key approach, which I kind of am anti, and or to deal with the treatment and rehabilitation strategies, which are essential, and I explain why. And then I also explain, based on the information of what these 2 individuals presented to us as well. And you guys have done pretty well with that. I've replied to some of these already. And then, of course, your quiz, I already told you about that. And then, of course, your live lecture here. So that's the assignments for the week. So now, with the rest of the time we have, let's delve into the lesson content and discuss the issues that are before us. Again, there's your assignments again. And again, need help with assignment, drugs and crime course folder. I already showed you that. Okay, that'll assist you with your assignments. It is awesome, tell you. It's really good. So anyway, let's talk about this. We've kind of talked about these things, but notice here, this is an article that presented some points that I've kind of elaborated on. That one of the things that has happened is that with this war on drugs thing, this more laws have been passed regarding the attitudes about drug use, abuse, addiction, and related behavior. And so what has happened here is that we have become, as I like to say from the legal perspective, since I am my background is law as a lawyer, is we are concentrating and focus on written rules to alleviate or deal with our drug problem. And so starting in the 80s, the war on drugs. It sounds like, oh, wow, we're going to really, we're going to crack down on this. And so what that means is that what we're going to do is we're going to pass laws. We're going to impose lengthy sentences for drug-related crimes. And it says, as a result, sentencing disparities exist for possession of powder and crack cocaine. I talked about that last week. Mandatory sentencing, though, has also dramatically increased the population because there are more people going in and there are not enough resources, and therefore we have the overcrowding issue. And so there are individuals who find themselves, instead of being locked away for long periods of time, need to be treated. Now, let's say this, people. Think about this. If you take the approach of locking someone up, they're going to, by the way, in prison, there's a pipeline in prison for drugs. It doesn't end just because you're incarcerated. There are drugs that are contraband that come into the prisons all the time. But here's my whole point in a nutshell. Let's assume that there weren't any, but that's not true. But let's just, for hypothetical situation here, assume that there were no drugs in prison at all, okay? So now what happens is you're locked up for a long period of time. You're given a minimal amount of treatment. It's just like somebody trying to treat a cold with, what do they call that? Penicillin or something along those lines. That's not going to help you with a cold. That deals with viruses. And so you're going to have a situation where you have individuals incarcerated that are going to do things to help them that operates only while they're there. Then as soon as they leave out, they're going to go back to business as usual, and then, or they're going to even get worse because maybe they were introduced while they were in there to individuals who are longer sentenced, received lengthier sentence than they did, and they will come out and trying to do things. Or maybe those individuals who provide them with the drugs while they're incarcerated, they will owe them, therefore they will pay them back by going out and committing crimes, becoming dealers, and to pay a debt, which oftentimes never happens, and they end up either back in prison or either killed, one or the other. And so because this mad cycle of recidivism continued to exist, it's equivalent to not addressing the actual problem, but instead, just temporarily dealing with it. It's like the way people think that the death penalty is a deterrent to crime. Well, that hasn't been the statistics, because the only party who is deterred from committing a crime who is executed is the one. Otherwise, it doesn't create somebody, oh, I think I better not do this because I might get the death penalty. It doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that. And that's the same thing with drugs here. So it says here, societal attitudes have shifted away from the war on drugs because of some of the things that I've already said. In reality, people for drug-related crimes may not be effective in reducing recidivism. Oh boy, what a bulletin. They finally got it. So the current topic is to deal with drug abuse, use, treatment, addiction, and the connection of criminal behavior, as I said, which is the criminal behavior is a means to the end of getting the drugs and satisfying the addictions that you have, or the ends and meet the ends, that kind of thing. So anyway, it says here, and it says it better than I can say it, and they'll just say this. The thought is that people who use or abuse are addicted also engage in drug-related activities. Bingo. In addition, there are underlying reasons why a person uses drugs and then engage in criminal behavior. I told you some of those. Um, One of the things that the young man pointed out to us that led him to use these drugs was his house. There was violence in his house all the time. And he did that as an escape mechanism as well. So there are reasons why a person uses or abuses drugs. And I'm sure that all of us have people that we know. I lost a sibling. I already said this last week. Baby sister, because my mom was killed when she was still a baby, and she never knew her. And she went through a whole lot of other changes and abuse, and then she ultimately found herself overdosing on crack cocaine. And so what happens is that it is devastating in the lives. Oh, one of the things that was brought out in that session is that the guy who is now a counselor shared something with us that was very close to his heart, and he had a hard time doing it, but he did it. He put a picture on each side of the room, and it was his son. And his son had just, within the last year or so, overdosed on heroin. And, you know, he was talking about it, and he was crying while he was talking about it. So he was talking about how the habits that his son had led him to a criminal life, but ultimately it was killing him. Did you not know, and this is the statistic that was quoted in the session, that there are more people, and listen to this, dying from drugs and drug abuse and use than killed with guns? Now, that's a powerful, powerful statement. The only thing is that we don't have those in the news the way that we had this situation. And then you see, we got another school shooting that took place since we had our last session. We had just had one down in Florida. We'll go way back. And so I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but hold on a little bit. But anyway, the disease model, I'm jumping right down here. Well, okay, let's talk about the self-medication model. Suggests that people use legal, and by the way, that is something too that was mentioned, is that these individuals started with over-the-counter drugs, and they weren't satisfactory. So they use these to overcome their anxiety, depression, or mental illness diagnosis. Now, listen to me. And then some develop mental health problems related to their compulsive use of drugs and other alternative things. Now, let me say this. We just had the anniversary of an incident that happened, I think it was 30 years ago. Let's see. A young lady by the name of Lori Dan in a suburban community called Winnetka in Illinois. You can go and you can Google it. But anyway, it was the very first school shooting that took place in the United States on the level of Columbine, Parkland, and now the killing that just took place this past week. Anyway, what they all have in common is mental illness and substance abuse. And what has happened is that these individuals, including, we found out, the guns that were used, that they were actually purchased or had something to do with his mother, the young man's mother, who they wondered how she was able to get the guns. We go back to all of these killings, and we see that, oh, wait a minute, we got a problem here with guns, but we also have a mental health problem that needs to be addressed so that we don't continue to have these individuals to commit these massive school shootings in situations and circumstances. So we have to be able to address not just the drug problem, but the mental health problem as well. They go hand in hand. And so this is something that we deal with. So we talk about the self-medication model, and that's where the person is just doing whatever they have to do to cope. And it then adversely affects the brain, the mind, and that was part of the session too, that they talked about when you take a drug, what it does and what part of the brain that it adversely affects. And they talked about the fact that there are many times individuals who utilize the drugs would find themselves off on situations where they would come back, but there would be irreparable damage done to the brain. Therefore, that individual functions differently from that point on in their lives. And it's comparable to like maybe losing a limb or something, except one difference, you can get a prosthetic. But in these mental health situations, those individuals are rendered permanently disabled, and their actions show. Then we have the disease model, based on the idea that addiction is the result of chemical or biological issues. And thus it says the theory is that punishing people for drugs and related crimes without addressing the reasons for the use of the drugs will not likely change the pattern of criminal behavior. Another bulletin, common sense stuff here. If you don't address the reasons, then it's going to continue on, So we'll take away the drugs, okay? But we also gotta remember, we also have to do something to help the individuals that are already on it. As a result, many public health advocates and medical professionals advocate that treatment should be part of any sentence. I wholeheartedly agree. And it says part of any sentence. Let me tell you something. The end to all of this is effective treatment for substance abuse. That is the end. Well, it's easy for you to say, Professor, you don't have to do the budgeting for that. Well, I got news for you. The consequences are high, such as these shootings. They all tie into it. They all, yes, is guns and the availability of guns, but this individual, I was told, also had other devices that he had available to him to kill people. But it's something wrong up here in the brain. And so if that's not treated, then the person's going to go back into it. So we're going to come back to this issue a little later in the course, right at near the end of it. So, but in the meantime, just a few things for your thought. So, and I'm not going to go through these, but you can go through these yourself, and I do recommend them. Question 1, theory that drug abusers can stop or control their use, but choose not to. And what theory is that? We already talked about it. We're dealing with that. We're dealing with disease model or the self-medication model. And so the point of the matter is you put your answer in there, then you go on and you go to the next one, okay? And so you operate on that basis. So what do we have here, people? What's the deal? The deal is, repeating what I have said earlier, is that substance abuse, the dealing with, you got to stop it at the early start, because once you get to this disease model uh, of addiction, that person has gone to the point they've already made it a way of life, and there may have been some brain damage that has taken place, and it's equal to taking a child that's maybe a 2-year-old and punishing them to a level that they don't understand why they were punished, because they don't have the capacity to comprehend or understand it. And that's the thing that happens sometimes and too often with individuals who are incarcerated for lengthy periods of time. It is something that's not going to go away until we reach the stage of deciding that we are actually going to address the issue and grab the bull by the horns and say, you know what, we got to meet this at the self-medication stage. We got to stop or minimize these mental health diseases that result from that, because then you get to the point of the disease model, and people are starting to use drugs at a higher level. The way that it was explained to us in the session that I went to is that you'll start with a low-level drug, and then you'll get introduced to some synthetics or some chemical drugs that are manufactured, and they get into the body, and they do irreparable damage to parts of the body, primarily the brain. Consequently, when that is done, those individuals find themselves in situations and circumstances where they can't control. Their impulses are based upon what their brain is sending to them. And the brain sends them a message, I got to have this. So what happens is this. They will try to even, as we say, chase the dragon. What they will do is they will take a drug, even a certain level of it, and want to get higher, and they will increase the dose or mix it with something that takes it to a higher high, which results in OD or overdose and death. So the fact of the matter is that if we're going to deal with drug use and criminal behavior, its relationship taking place, we have to. We have no other choice but to deal with drug-related convictions. When I was in drug court as a lawyer, I represented individuals, and this was elaborated on the other day, that nothing has really changed there, is that the judges there operate more like counselors and will give you options and recognize that if you're not going to follow their options, then you will go to jail. And they recognize and know that that means that, but their goal is not to send you to jail. Now, there are people that say, well, what about these people who have large quantities? And that was addressed in our assignment discussion forum last week, and dealing again today. The point of the matter is this, is that if we take away the customers, then the dealers can't operate. The dealers can only be effective with customers. As you know, if there is no demand for an item, what happens is that it no longer sells, and it eventually disappears. Why do we have the World Wide Web? Because there was a demand that came about in the 80s for the World Wide Web. And so now it's here to stay because it's a tool that's used for good, such as what we're doing right now, having class. I'm here in Romeoville, and you guys are all over the United States hearing me talk or seeing me as well. the point of the matter is that it's the tool, and depends on what you use it. But you also know that it can be used in a adverse situations to create problems, such as what I was talking about earlier, the issue I was addressing, which delayed the class for a little bit, where there was an unauthorized charge that I noticed on my statement, and then I had to call the creditor or the vendor, excuse me, and discuss with them, and then we got to the bottom of what happened. But the bottom line is that with every tool, there's something that's bad that can happen with it. Some really common household items mixed the wrong way can create individuals who use drugs to result in brain damage or also their deaths as well. When you buy heroin in the streets, the question is, what is it cut with, or what is it mixed with, to maybe spread it out, and then you utilize that, and that goes into your body. So what does it do? It adversely affects the brain, controls your activities, and can ultimately result in your life ending. So that's it, for today. These theories of addiction, and also the identification of the crimes that go with it. Like I said again, as a lawyer, I always recognized whenever I had a client, even if it wasn't a drug case, I would, kind of determine. I would say this to you, that I'll give you an example, and I'm going to close with this example. I had a young man I represented some years ago, and this young man, he had been incarcerated in prison, and then he got out, and he ended up, as we say, catching a case, which means that he violated his parole, and that he was heading back to jail. So I came in as his lawyer, and in terms of talking with this young man, I quickly discerned and recognized that he had a drug problem. And so I told the family, I said, I generally would indicate to the family to try to get their person out on bond. But I told them, don't do that with him. I said, because if he did, it's not going to be helpful for him. So anyway, I remained his lawyer, and somebody in the family was told by somebody else that, well, if this is the attorney's family member, he would want them out. They were wrong. I wouldn't want them out, because they were a danger to themselves. So anyway, what ended up happening is this young man, while he was out on bond, disappeared from home. And what he did was he left home, and he went across a highway, a freeway or expressway, as we call it. He went over it, over the fence, ran across the busy highway to the other side of the same town that he was living in, and that he attempted to burglarize a house. Well, the police were called, and a chase resulted, and he was pursued. And he decided to go back to the same path. And when he got to the expressway part, he didn't make it. He was hit by a couple of vehicles, a truck and car. Anyway, he was killed. And this was a long time ago. This was, this was at least 34, 35 years ago. And so his family, knowing me very well, they all said, we're sorry, that we wish we'd have listened to you. And I said, no, I'm sorry that you didn't listen to me, because I knew that when this young man got out, that he had no other choice. He was not getting the help that he needed at the Cook County Jail where he was, and that when he got out, he needed some serious help. And judges recognize that there are different levels, and you'll see this in drug court, that sometimes they will say, okay, we're sentencing you to a period of time in jail, but the condition that you receive treatment, and while you're in custody, you're going to receive that. But let's say if that particular individual was then released, then they recognize that that individual was at a level where they're not going to do it, and they're not going to be successful, and they're going to be either recidivist or either like this young man ended up with being killed. And so it's an ongoing problem. And so that was a sad situation. He was a real good friend. His family still friends of mine today. And in fact, one of the brothers, I mentored him, and he's now a criminal defense lawyer. Anyway, the point of the matter is that it's some really bad things that are going on, and we need to address them. Okay, guys, it's about 9:34. I am going to end this session, and I am going to use the topic for the key word, drug abuse. That's it. I'm not saying it anymore. That's what I'm going to be looking for. So I wish you guys a great week. I hope that you picked up some stuff, because I can tell you, man, that was the most beneficial session that I attended in a while this past week. And it was really perfect for this week's lecture. So I'm going to say good night to you guys, and I will see you next week at the same time for week 4's lectures. Any questions, you know how to reach out to me. I don't have to tell you. It's all been given. So good night.